So this is part of a series, a two-part series on the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer, which is derived in Parshas Emor in Sefer Vayikra from the pasuk that says "Usfartem lachem," and you should count for yourselves. We're going to see what the word michem means, or lachem. Usfartem lachem. Lachem seems to imply some sort of very personal involvement. It's not just something technical or something external, but it's really something like, for example, at the very beginning of Sefer Vayikra, the Torah says, Adam ki yakriv mikem, again, that same word mikem. And that's the parsha of Karbanot. And Karbanot has to be mikem. It has to be with your will. Nobody can force you to bring a karban, because the word karban comes from the word lehit karev, to get closer. No one could force you to get closer to God. You have to be motivated. You have to really want from the depths of your heart. That's called mikem, something. So obviously, by comparison, in Sefira, it's got to be something that comes from within. And that's what we're going to try to figure out. So the structure of the class tonight is kind of 50-50. What do I mean? Half Brisk and half Breslov. Now, my name is Berzon, so that starts with the letter B. So it's the triple B. It's Brisk, and it's Breslov, and it's Berzon. Those are the three B's. Okay, then? Shalom Aleichem, how are you? Okay, how's it going?
It's such a pleasure to see me. I mean, you.
Very good. And it is a pleasure to see you, that's for sure. And whenever it gets cold, I think of you because he's from Montreal.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
David, how are you? What did you speak about tonight?
I didn't speak.
Oh, you didn't speak. You got away with it. There's plenty of room here. Anybody?
Sure.
See another chair here?
How are you? No. It's okay. You're totally double admired. Now we're talking about Sefirat HaOmer, and that mitzvah which is derived from Usfartem Lachem. And I was just mentioning before you came in that the structure of the shir is that we move from Brisk to Breslov. Okay, then? So that's what we try to do. So what does Brisk have to say about Sefirat HaOmer? So let me give a little bit of an introduction to the mitzvah, what's called the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. So the Torah commands us to go out and cut the barley for the Karban HaOmer. And that's a special mitzvah in the Torah. And what's unique about that mitzvah is that it only applies at night. It's what we call a mitzvah halayla. And we go out at night to a nearby field, and there are many, many different nuances of halachas and dinim, and we cut the omer. Now, the Mishnah tells us that any mitzvah that applies at night applies throughout the entire night, from nightfall until daybreak, but not beyond daybreak. So the omer could not be cut during the day. It had to be cut during the night. That's the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. Okay, if I had a whiteboard, I would write it on the whiteboard. Sefiras HaOmer, cutting the omer.
There a quick reason why it's at night and not during the day?
The Torah doesn't give us a clue.
Oh.
But it seems like it's a preparation for bringing the omer. So the omer is brought during the day, and it's got to be prepared at night. So we have to cut the omer at night.
From a practical point of view, you'd have to bring out torches or whatever.
Correct. So we're gonna discuss that on a different occasion, but exactly how they engineer it logistically, that's a different discussion. So the Mishnah says, Kol halayla kosher l'ktziras ha'omer. That's the first line that we sent out on the page. What does that mean, Kol halayla? The entire night, but not beyond the night, because that's called a mitzvah halayla. Now, there are very rare and few cases of mitzvah halayla, and this is one of them. This is the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. Another example, who could think of another example of a mitzvah Shabbalayla? Kriyat Shema at night. On a Doraisa level, I'm talking now. So we have Kriyat Shema at night. Ukashobachah means you have to recite Kriyat Shema at night. If you forgot to recite Kriyat Shema at night, you cannot recite Kriyat Shema during the day. You have another mitzvah to recite Kriyat Shema by day, but the Kriyat Shema of night, you missed up. So that's called mitzvahs halayla, shera kol halayla, up until the end of the night.
Are there other Lila mitzvahs? Are there other ones?
Yeah, you have to look in the Mishnah. I didn't bring the Mishnah to you because our discussion tonight is about Sefiras HaOmer, counting the Omer. And here we're going to have a tremendous controversy about the relationship between counting the Omer and cutting the Omer. And there's going to be one school of thought, which I call interdependence, meaning the time for Ktsiras HaOmer and the time for Sefiras HaOmer are identical, which would mean that Sefiras HaOmer is another example of a mitzvah halayla. So that would mean that the latest time for counting the Omer is daybreak. But once it's day, it's no longer Ktsiras HaOmer, you can't count the Omer, and therefore you cannot count the Omer because counting the Omer depends upon the time of cutting the Omer. You follow me so far? So that's going to be one sheet in the Rishonim, and that's Rabbeinu Tam. You heard of Rabbeinu Tam, the great Rishon from Rashi's family. Shachach levarech balayla. If he forgot to count the Omer at night, lo yivarech bayom. He cannot bless the mitzvah of counting the Omer by day, because apparently Rabbeinu Tam accepts the principle of interdependence. Do you follow what I mean by interdependence? In Talmudic language, that's called ha-ba-ha talia. When you have two things that depend one on the other, like for example, tzitzis, you have to have 4 corners and 4 tzitzis. That's ha-ba-ha talia. You can't have 3, you can't have 5. You need 4. That's the magic number. Here says Rabbeinu Tam, if you messed up at night, that's it. Finito, as we say in Italian, right? It's ball game over. And that's Rabbeinu Tam. And Tosfos says that according to Rabbeinu Tam, mitzvahs sfira, ki mitzvahs ktsira, he mitzvahs halayla. That sfira and ktsira are both a mitzvah shebalayla. I mean, that's not such good news because, you want to have a longer opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah. Now, listen to the Rambam. The Rambam says, Shachach v'lo mona balayla, mone bayom. The Rambam says that if you didn't count at night, then you should count during the day. The Rambam has no problem. As we say, no sweat. You didn't count at night, count during the day. Did the Rambam accept the principle interdependence of Rabbeinu Tam? Absolutely not. He rejected it. There's one mitzvah called Ktsiras HaOmer, cutting the Omer. There's another separate independent mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. And Sefiras HaOmer means that every day has to be counted, but the day is made up of 2 parts. It begins at night, and it encompasses also what? The day. Are you following me? It's a 24-hour unit. And therefore the Rambam says, what difference does it make whether you count it at night or you count during the day? So notice that the Rambam says, Shachach v'lo mona balayla. Then he counts during the day. What does Shachach mean? B'di'evid. This is not the ideal way of doing it. Even the Rambam agrees that ideally you should count Sefiras HaOmer at night. It's only if you forgot to do so, then we give you the allowance to count Sefiras HaOmer when? During the day. Rabbeinu Tam doesn't allow that. So why does the Rambam require that if all things are equal, you should count at night? And the Rambam answers that question. And he writes the following. Mitzvahs aseh, lispar sheva shabbosos tmimos. What does the word tmimos mean? Complete. Because the Torah says, sheva shabbosos tmimos tiyena. Says the Rambam, therefore, mitchilas hayom monim, from the beginning of the day. What does the Rambam want to achieve by counting the beginning of the day? Tmimos. What do you mean complete? He wants to get the entire day counted. How do you get the entire day counted? by counting at the beginning of the day. If you count in the middle of the day, then half of the day was not counted, and it's not Tmimos. So the Rambam says, Lefichach mona balayla, therefore he counts during the day so that he can get Tmimos. But if, let's say, he didn't count, I'm sorry, did I say during the day? I meant to say at night.
Yeah.
Sorry. He should count at night so that the entire day is counted. That's called Tmimos. But in event that he didn't count at night, says the Rambam, he'll count during the day. Why? Because the mitzvah encompasses the entire day. We want to add another element, we call the icing on top. And what's that? Tmimos. How does he get Tmimos? By counting the earliest possible moment. And in fact, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, you'll see that the poskim write that you should try to count the earliest time. In fact, the Vilna Gaon was of the opinion that as soon as the sun sets, you should already be counting. Because you don't want to miss that sliver, that section of time of the day between sunset and Seis HaKochavim when the stars come out. Other poskim disagree because they say, well, it's not yet Lila. We want to wait till the day starts. So the Jewish halachic day starts at when? At night. Everybody knows that. Hayom holech achar Lila. The day follows the night. For the non-Jews, it's just the opposite. When does the day begin? With sunrise. But for us, on the contrary, with sunset, that's when the day begins. So you want to get the entire day counted, says the Rambam. Therefore, you want to count at night. But the mitzvah is not a mitzvah halayla. There's no reason, according to the Rambam, to limit the mitzvah to night. Whereas Rabbeinu Tam holds that when is the mitzvah applicable? Only at night. Why? Because of the interdependence theory. It depends on what? The time for Ketziras HaOmer. And Ketziras HaOmer must be at night, therefore Sefiras HaOmer is then. But according to the Rambam, they're two separate mitzvahs. Mm-hmm. In Yiddish, we say, Zvei Bezundere mitzvahs. One mitzvah of Ketziras HaOmer, and another independent mitzvah of what? Sefiras HaOmer.
Mhm.
I apologize for my ignorance, but I do have a question. If you're threshing you're threshing the barley at night.
Right.
When do you offer it up?
The next day.
You can't do it the same night, obviously. You don't.
No, the Mikdash is closed for business.
So-
It's a big sign, closed for business.
So-
It's like my father was down south once in Virginia, and he was looking for a place to daven. It was in the month of July. Anyway, they told him that there's a synagogue called Sha'arei Shamayim. Sha'arei Shamayim. Anyway, he gets to Sha'arei Shamayim finally. That's that part of that city in Virginia. And there's a big sign. Gates of the heaven closed for the summer. True story, Mike.
The question that I have, based on what you just said, is are they allowed to thresh the barley on Pesach, since we're counting it on the end of the
Well,
day
again,
following?
without any, without any, we'd have to get into the issue of chametz and matzah in the Beis Hamikdash.
Right.
There are different laws that apply to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, here's what I want to ask you. Tosfos quotes a Bahag. Now, what is the Bahag? Who is the Bahag? Anybody know? Beit Hey Gimel. What's Beit Hey Gimel? Bahag. Strange name. Baal Halachot Gedolot. And the Baal Halachot Gedolot says the following. I'll read to you his language. Hecha deshachach lispar b'layla. He forgot at night. Says the Bahag. Sofer biyom. Who does that sound like? Before I read the next two words. Sounds like the Rambam. And these are two independent mitzvahs. There's one mitzvah of what? Of Sefiras, of Ketziras HaOmer, and a separate mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. And therefore, Sofer Bayom, he can count during the day. But now I'm going to read the next two words. Below brach.
So you're saying the Rambam? I was actually going to ask that before because I didn't hear from the Rambam that you couldn't make the bracha.
No, because the Rambam doesn't make any distinction. He says,
According to the Rambam,
you
make a bracha
could
during
count
the
at
day?
night, you can count during the day. The best thing ideally is to count at night, so the entire day is counted. But nowhere does the Rambam give you a clue that there's anything in counting by day that is critical. In other words, that would be ma'akev, that would undermine the mitzvah. The Rambam seems to indicate that you have a perfectly fine kiyum mitzvah, you fulfilled your mitzvah during the day. The only thing is, okay, you didn't get the entire day in. Even when you count at night, sometimes you don't get the entire day. People come back from work very late. They get I come from Har Nof. In Har Nof, I once had a minyan at 1:45 a.m. for Myra. I don't know if you can get that here in Efrat. I mean, that's one of the things I sacrificed. We were actually 9 people at about 20 to 1. And we were getting a little nervous. Where's the 10th? What?
Who did you call?
Yeah, so what do you do in such a case? It's really, and one of the guys actually had to say Kaddish. So anyway, people got up during that 5-minute period, started telling a story. So one guy starts telling a story that we were in the same position about 6 months earlier. And we decided to call a cab, hail down a cab, we'll pay him for his time, Bapa Yarmulke on his head, and we'll have a minyan. And he finished the story by telling us that that's exactly what they did. They bopped the yarmulke, but they didn't really have to bop the yarmulke because that driver, like many Sfaradim, had a kippah in his back pocket. And P.S., he didn't take a penny.
Wow.
By the time he finished the story, a 10th man came in and we had a minyan.
Wow.
So, but we counted the HaOmer. I mean, there was a large part of the night that we didn't count. So we didn't count the entire day,
But according to the Rambam, a person could say the bracha during the day.
Yes, of course. According to the Rambam, for sure, you can make a bracha during the day. But the Bahag has something that we call mimanavshach. It doesn't seem to fit into any category. If the Bahag would agree with Rabbeinu Tam, then why is he telling me that you count during the day? The Bahag, if he holds interdependence, then just like Rabbeinu Tam, who says that, you missed it, you blew it, finito, if you didn't count at night, you can't count during the day, the Bahag should have said there's no point to counting during the day. It's what we call an exercise in futility. But if, on the other hand, the Bahag agrees with the Rambam, and the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer is not like Ktsiras HaOmer, it's not a mitzvah of Laila, but what? It's a mitzvah that encompasses the entire day, so why should he make a bracha during the day? Should I repeat that, or you got it? One more time. The Bahag falls between the cracks. It doesn't make any sense. If the Bahag accepts the interdependence theory of Rabbeinu Tam, then why is he advocating that we count during the day? It's meaningless. Ktsiras HaOmer has to be done by night, then Sefiras HaOmer has to be done by night. If, on the other hand, the Bahag accepts the Rambam's view that Ktsiras HaOmer and Sefiras HaOmer are 2 separate mitzvahs, then why does he tell you that when you count during the day, you have to omit what? The bracha. This was the problem that we faced. So we asked the true blue brisker, Rav Soloveitchik, if he could give us some insight into this Bahag. And you'll be shocked at what he said. He says that the Bahag agrees with Rabbeinu Tam. The interdependence theory, that means that the Bahag also is committed to the position that Sefiras HaOmer has to be when? By night. So we said, Rebbe, well, what's going on over here? If Sefiras HaOmer is by night, why does the Bahag say that Shachach, Lispar B'Layla, Sofer Bayom, B'li Bracha? Why is he Sofer Bayom? It's meaningless. Rabbeinu Tam doesn't tell you, well, if you miss the night, count during the day. Very difficult. So Rav Soloveitchik said the following, that if you want to understand the Bahag, you have to read the next part of Tosfos, who quotes the Bahag on a different issue. This is a most profound issue, most controversial in Sefiras HaOmer. You forgot to count a day. An entire day went by. You didn't count the 13th day, and now you're up to the 14th. So some Rishonim say that you can go on and count. Okay, you didn't count yesterday. So what? Today you'll count. And other Rishonim, including the Bahag, say that if you missed a day, you can't count anymore. you've just messed up your Sefira, that's all. So in a book called the Sefer Chinuch, I don't know if you ever heard of it, it was written about 9 centuries ago, by Rabbi Aaron HaLevi. He writes that the issue is, how do you understand Sefiras HaOmer? Is it one mitzvah of 49 countings, like tzitzis, which is one mitzvah of 4 knafos, or is every night a separate mitzvah? There are 49 separate mitzvahs. Those Rishonim who advocate that if you missed a full day, you can continue counting, they hold what? 49 separate mitzvahs. Each night, each day is a separate independent mitzvah. Those who say that if you missed a day, you cannot continue, they maintain that Sefiras HaOmer is one mitzvah, and it's made up of 49 segments. And if you miss one segment, you don't have the whole picture. So the Bahag says if you missed a day, that's it. It's all over. Says Rav Soloveitchik, listen carefully. The Bahag agrees that every night is a separate mitzvah. So why then, if he misses a day, he can no longer continue and count Sefiras HaOmer? Do you hear the question? Again, we're saying no. Not like everyone else understands the Bahag, that it's one mitzvah that encompasses 49 parts. And therefore, if you miss the day, the whole, it's like a deck of cards, it all falls down. No. The Bahag agrees that every day is a separate independent mitzvah. So then why, if you missed a day, did you completely undermine your Sefiras HaOmer? Anybody? Says Rav Soloveitchik, Sefiras HaOmer requires continuity. You cannot count today as day 14 if you didn't count yesterday as day 13. These are what's called cardinal numbers, meaning you go from one number to the next number to the next number. And I once told Rav Soloveitchik that I think I found a proof that would support that theory. Because the Sefer Chinuch about, let's say it's about 40 years ago, was republished. And they went back to manuscripts. And in the manuscript edition, he writes the following. Misha shachach yom echad, a person forgot a full day, yomar, he should declare, emesh hayakach v'kach. Vayom hu kach v'kach. What's emesh? Yesterday. In other words,
before he counts.
Before he counts today, he has to count yesterday. He missed yesterday. What's the point of counting yesterday? Yesterday's gone. The answer is, you can't count today unless you counted yesterday. There's no continuity.
Why not? I mean, if the whole point is counting up, okay, so you missed a day, it's very sad. I hear the theory, but counting up.
Would you mind, can we squeeze in another chair here? It's just going to be easier for my neck if you...
I can do that. Yes.
You don't mind?
But
guys, move over, drop if you can.
I'll sit right here. It's okay.
No, just so I could look at you.
If we're counting up towards Matan Torah, so just continue anyway, even if it's
right. But what is Sefira? Rav Soloveitchik is analyzing the essential concept of Sefira. Sefira means counting. Counting means continuity. Counting means I build on the number of yesterday. If I don't have the number of yesterday, so I went from 12 to 14, that's not counting. You can't say today's the 14th without saying that yesterday was the 13th. But the question is, if I missed the 13th, can I at least salvage the Sefira by saying that yesterday was the 13th? And then we get into another question. What if he missed 2 days or 3 days or 48 days? How far can we go with this? But I just wanted to support Rav Soloveitchik's theory that there is a basic halach of continuity. Again, I don't want to get beyond our discussion because I want to get to Breslov a little bit, but there's a shita of the Dvar of Ram that Sveika Diyoma, like in Chutzot, they don't know exactly what day of the month it is. That's not good for Sefiras HaOmer because Sefira requires a certain definite, certain nature. I know what tonight is. And that's why it's important that people listen to the Shliach Tzibur when he counts, because otherwise they may count the wrong day. But Rav Soloveitchik is saying something else. Now let's get back to our original question. What was our original problem? According to the Bahag, like Rabbeinu Tam, Sefira has to be counted when? At night. And yet, the Bahag advocates that if he forgot to count at night, he should count during the day. So we ask the question, what meaning, what significance is there? What's the point to count during the day if you hold like Rabbeinu Tam? If you hold like Rabbeinu Tam, then just like Sefiras HaOmer requires what? Lila, so too Sefiras HaOmer requires Lila. So why are you counting during the day? And the Bahag says leave out a bracha. Okay, leave out a bracha, that's fine. But why does he advocate that we have to count that day? Exactly. Says Rav Soloveitchik continuity. Because although the mitzvah per se is at night, but the counting could be during the day. What is the purpose of the counting during the day? Not for the sake of a mitzvah. How do I know it's not for the sake of a mitzvah according to the Bahag? No bracha. If there's no bracha, it's because it's not a mitzvah. So why are you counting? The answer is you're creating a Maisa Sefira. You're doing an act of counting. And the act of counting means that now I counted the day 13, I can now count the day 14. Although according to the Bahag, if you left out a full day, you cannot continue counting. But here it's not considered that you left out a full day because you counted during the day and not at night.
Thank God you can still continue with the bracha then.
And now you can continue with the bracha.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So what the Bahag is trying to salvage is the next part of the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. Every day is a separate mitzvah. Every day you make a bracha. Every day you get brownie points and credit up above for counting that day. You missed at night, you can't count during the day, but you'll count during the day so that tomorrow you can count and maintain the continuity.
The Bahag would hold if someone became a bar mitzvah in the middle school.
Oh, beautiful.
Couldn't count.
You read this or you didn't read this? What's the point of sending it out to you guys? I drive Howie myself crazy, because he knows how to do the photography. I don't know, he has an app on his phone. Anyway, so David is right. What would be, according to the Bahag, in a case of a bar mitzvah? This boy, anybody here who's bar mitzvah during Sefira? No? It's quite common. I mean, your son is bar mitzvah during Sefira. So every bar mitzvah boy who was born during Sefira darshans about this issue. That's the famous drasha of a bar mitzvah boy who was born during Sefira. Can he continue counting? Until now, he's been counting.
With the bracha.
Why? Why was he counting? Is he obligated? A cut in his part of he didn't chino. So he's only counting he didn't chino. So the question is, according to the Bahag, the way Rav Soloveitchik understands the Bahag, could we consider the counting Nidin Chinuch as what? As a Maisa Sefira. It's an act of counting. So that now he can continue counting. See, if a person was in a coma, Nebuch, and then he wakes up from a coma and he hasn't counted one day or more, then according to Bahag, tough luck. I mean, my heart goes out for him, but he missed the day. But what happens in a bar mitzvah boy who's been counting every single day? Can we recognize his counting as a katan, bidin chinuch, as if it was a Maisa Sefira, so that he can maintain the continuity? And here I have another question. What would be, according to the Bahag, the way Rav Soloveitchik understood it, if a person would count, listen carefully, shalo almanas lotzes, meaning he has kavana shalo lotzes. Like, I'll give you an example why a person would do such a thing. What do you say? Lotzes to fulfill his obligation. Let me give you, it'll become, I'll flesh it out for you. Right now, it doesn't make any sense. What happens, let's say, if you would ask me now, what number are we up to? So I don't want to fulfill my mitzvah because, I'm waiting for my minyan. I want to do it with the Shliach Tzibur, or I want to make a bracha. Right now, I don't have the chance to make a bracha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count without kavana lotzes. Do you follow what I mean? I'm going to have a negative intention. I'm going to make a statement. I don't want to fulfill this mitzvah at this particular point. Then what happens? Time goes on, and I forgot to count. Can I continue counting the next day according to the Bahag? The Bahag says if I left out a day, I can't continue counting. But did I leave out a day?
Yes.
Why? Why do you say yes?
If you didn't have kavana.
Oh, so it could be that the requirement of kavana is in the kiyum mitzvah, not in the Maisa Sefira. Meaning, as far as accounting is concerned, I counted. Again, I don't want to say it out loud, but let's say it was yesterday. I said it was the 14th day of the Omer. I counted the day. Again, I didn't want to be Yotze, so I don't have a Kiyuma mitzvah. It's the same as the Bahag counting during the day when he didn't count at night. When we said according to the Bahag, that could maintain the continuity. And why? Because it's a Maisa Sefira. Did he fulfill his mitzvah during the day? No. But he has an act of counting. He has counted that day.
If he didn't mean to count.
Wait, so you don't get the
He did mean to count it. I mean, he asked me, what is today? I told him it's the 13th day of the Omer or the 4th. So I did mean to count it, but not to count it for the sake of the mitzvah. So could that counting be considered as an act of counting so that henceforth he continue to maintain his
So
sphere?
what do they say? Yes?
This is just Berzon talking.
Oh.
Nobody talks about this.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
maybe you'll find something, anything that anybody said, you'll always find something.
Okay.
Now they have something called Otzer HaChachma. It's a collection, an anthology of about 50,000 books. So maybe if you know how to work it, there's something called Bar Ilan. Have you ever heard of Tofnit Bar Ilan? No? Bar Ilan is a program that you can get. I mean, it's not so expensive. And it has thousands of books, mostly chuvas, responsive literature. I remember the story was told about Rav Avad Yosef. He had an amazing memory. So they told him that Bar Ilan came out and that you could check and look on any question for all the chuvas, all the responses that were ever written. And Rav Avad he was not impressed. So they said, "Can we test you, Rebbe? Test me." So they asked him a question, and he rattled off 69 chuvas. They fed it to the Bar Ilan program, and there was 71 chuvas. So they said, "Rebbe, you see, you messed up." He says, "Who were the two chuvas that I left out?" "Oh, that was Yabia, Omer, and Yalkud Adas. Those are my chuvas. I was counting other people's chuvas, not my chuvas." It's a true story. He wasn't impressed with Bar Ilan. Anyway.
It's called the Shoot Barilan.
Shoot Bar Ilan, right. It's Shoot Bar Ilan. Excellent. And they give, every couple of years they upgrade it and they charge you more to get the upgrade. It's yeah. Well, I don't blame them. It's expensive. They have a whole staff working on it. Okay. So that's what we have here in this Brisk article. And now we'll
Did we answer the bar mitzvah?
So I'm thinking out loud that according to the Rav Soloveitchik's understanding of the Bahag, a bar mitzvah boy had counted the days, albeit without a kiyum mitzvah because he's not obligated. It's just education. It's just chinuch, getting into the shmung of things. But nevertheless, it is a Maisa Sefira. He counted, and therefore he should be able to count with a bra, according to the Rav. Again, if you go with the regular classic understanding of the Bahag, that it's a package deal, it's one mitzvah made up of 49 countings, then he hasn't counted. But with the Rav's understanding that there are two dimensions to the mitzvah, there's the Maisa Sefira, and then there's the Sefira Shel Mitzvah, and therefore the Bahag holds that at night, if you didn't count during the night, you forfeit the possibility of a Kiyum mitzvah, but you count during the day to achieve a Maisa Sefira, so that henceforth you can continue counting. Then we can negotiate about a bar mitzvah boy and see if we can possibly allow it to happen. All right, then? Now here I want to move on to Likutei Halachos. So just to get a little bit of background, I'm sure you all know this, but just in case. You know that the Rebbe of Breslov was Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman, died as a very young man. I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, 38. So, and he had many students and disciples, but there's one that, is Shakol Keneged Kulam. If you put one, and that's Rabbi Nassan, on one side of the scale and all the others on the other, Rabbi Nassan would by far outweigh all of them. And in fact, many of the disciples of Rabbi Nachman thought that Rabbi Nassan would take over as the Rebbe after Rabbi Nachman passed away. But Rabbi Nassan refused. He said there's only one Rebbe, and I can't possibly be the Rebbe. So we have Rabbi
Who took
Nosson.
over?
What do you say?
Who took over?
Nobody.
Nobody.
It's always Rabbi Nachman.
Mm.
Any chassid of Breslov, if you ask him who the Rebbe is, he'll tell you Rabbi Nachman. That's it. But Rabbi Nosson was an incredible thinker. He had a tremendous mind. He came from the Lithuanian world of Misnagdim, but he heard Rabbi Nachman and he fell in love with Rabbi Nachman. He became his greatest disciple. In fact, all that we have, not all, but almost all that we have from the Rebbe comes through Rabbi Nosson. Why? Because Rabbi Nosson would hear the lecture, the presentation, what's called the lesson, and he would write it down. And then, in many cases, not in all cases, he would show it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would say, make a few corrections, and that's what we have Likutei Maran. And Likutei Maran, which is Rabbi Nachman's Torah, has been translated to English by the Breslov Institute, and it's, I'm not sure exactly, but 15 volumes at least, probably more. Rabbi Nachman was translated, but Rabbi Nosson was not translated. And that's where we're up to today. And the Breslov Institute is trying to translate Rabbi Nosson. Because without Rabbi Nosson, it's almost impossible to understand Rabbi Nosson.
Volume is out.
So the first volume is out, and I'll tell you the honest truth. Again, I'm prejudiced. I don't want to prejudice you, but the first volume is excellent, but it took years. The first volume, now let me explain to you, this is Rabbi Nosson on Orach Chaim. The Shulchan Aruch is divided into 4 parts, and the Rebbe commissioned Rabbi Nosson, his greatest disciple, to go through Shulchan Aruch and take all the Torah of the Rebbe and shed a light on the Shulchan Aruch. 4 parts, okay? The first part of the Shulchan Aruch is called the Orach Chaim. This is Rabbi Nosson on Orach Chaim, right? How many pages does it have? Close to 500 pages, okay? Close to 500 pages. This is the second volume of Orach Chaim. And there's a third volume of Orach Chaim. At that rate, you're talking about 1,500 pages of Rabbi Nosson's interpretation of Orach Chaim. Just 1/4 of Shulchan Aruch. 1,500 pages. So the first volume that came out was written on Ashkamas HaBoker and Netilas Yadayim, Shachris, which means Negel Vasa. It's a book this thick, and it covers, out of the first volume of Rabbi Nosson, approximately 45 pages out of 500 pages. So at the rate they're going, your great-great-great-great-grandchildren may see that this project will complete itself. It's just massive. Just to give you...
Maran was also like that, 15 volumes for one.
Yeah, but again, Likutei Maran is a translation of 1 volume.
One volume.
1 volume.
Yeah,
Could you
15
imagine what it would
volumes.
mean to translate Likutei Halachos of Rabbi Nosson? It's just, it's a mind-boggling undertaking. Because again, the translation has 3 parts to it. It has the actual translation of Rabbi Nosson's writings, that's in bold print. Then it has a translation of a Hebrew elucidation. The elucidation is probably 5 times, if not 10 times the size of the dark print of Rabbi Nosson. And then on the bottom, there are footnotes. The footnotes are probably twice the size as the elucidation. It's just beyond belief. In any event, in many, many different places within Rabbi Nosson's writings, he talks about Sefiras HaOmer. And I would like to relate tonight to 2 of them. And B'li Neder, well, I don't know, next week is, Yom HaTzvut is on Wednesday, so I don't know exactly, we'll have to negotiate Thursday. But on the next occasion, we'll still be within Sefiras HaOmer. We can still get to mitzvah counting. So, in Mitzvah Hashem, I want to get more into this at that time. I mentioned at the outset that the Torah commands us, Usfartem lachem. Now, the word lachem, I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to give me the wrong answer because I want the wrong answer. Is it in plural or in singular? In Lashon Rabim or in Lashon Yachid?
Plural.
Plural. It's in Lashon Rabim.
Singular.
Okay, but why? Why singular? Okay. So the Vilna Gaon says the following, that in the Parsha Bahar, where the Torah commands us to count the days of Shemitah, the years of Shemitah, and the years of Yovel, it says Usfarta L'cha in the singular. And in Omer, it says Usfartem Lachem. Says the Vilna Gaon, a mind-boggling chiddush, that when it uses the singular, it's an obligation on the entire community. But the entire community of Israel is one entity, indivisible. And therefore it says lecha. Now, if there's a mitzvah that's incumbent on the entire community as an indivisible entity, then who's going to fulfill the mitzvah? Exactly. Best.
Who?
Best in the courts.
Oh.
The courts are in charge of counting the years of Shemitah until they get to 7 cycles of 7, and then the 50th year is sanctified as Yovel. All that is lecha. But when the Torah says Usfartem lachem, lachem, says the Vilna Gaon, means you, me, everybody as an individual. Lachem is not one entity, but rather it addresses every single individual. Says Rabbi Nosson, what that means is that through the Sefira, I move forward from one day to the next. And every day I build on the day before. And it's a process. And I'm getting closer and closer to my ultimate goal on day 50, which is what? Matan Torah. Says Rabbi Nosson, we have a problem. Because when a person evaluates his achievements, his accomplishments from day to day, it's human nature to look over one's shoulder and to compare oneself to someone else. Has anyone here ever heard the phrase, comparison breeds frustration or contempt? Have you ever heard that phrase? When you start comparing yourself to someone else, it's not good. Because you're going to say, well, look, he has very similar background to me. He maybe has the same birthday as me. Maybe he comes from the same town as me. He had the same kind of parents that I had. We had the same upbringing. But look what he accomplished. Look what he achieved. He's so polished. He's doing mitzvahs. He's doing chesed. He's writing Sfarim. He's doing Chidushei Torah. And look at me. Who am I? I'm nobody, so to speak. I don't have that significance and that importance. Says Rabbi Nosson, that is not anova. That is not the humility that the Torah considers to be positive. That's anova psula. That's an invalid humility. And that's going to only bring a person to the worst. What's the worst thing in the world from a Breslov point of view?
Not to be happy.
Atzvus, exactly. Atzvus means sadness. And a person has to be an unav, realize that there's more to be achieved, that he hasn't yet exploited all his possibilities, but never ever to get down. Never ever to say, well, why aren't I like so-and-so? Who remembers the famous story of Zusha? Do you remember? Zusha?
When he dies, you're going to be not worried about being compared to Abraham, much worried compared to.
Excellent. Zusha, what I'm afraid of is they're going to ask me, Zusha, why weren't you Zusha? But I'm not going to compare myself. How do I size up to the Vilna Gaon, who wrote the amazing Chidushim that he wrote? How can I size up to Lubavitcher Rebbe, who we don't even know when he slept? He was always makabel people. How can I size up to this one or that one? That's anova psula. That's invalid anova. Your question is, why aren't I myself? Why aren't I living up to my identity, to my potential? And that's usfartem lachem. The Torah emphasizes lachem. Don't look here, don't look there. The Torah is addressing you, and you're in a separate box, so to speak. And just think about yourself. And this, I feel, touches on something that's so basic to Breslov, and that is called Nekuda Tova. Do you remember that? This is Reish Pei Beis Azamra, and what it means is that I have to find the good in myself, the good in others. Now we move on. All that I told you is Rabbi Nassan in his writings on Hilchas Tefillin, I believe. But now we get to his writings on Hilchas Tfilas Mincha. Now Mincha is kind of a sad davening. What do I mean by sad? I mean, it's like a nevach. You know what the word nevach is? Like, Mincha is like not here and not there. You know, I remember when I went to college, I went to Queens College in Manhattan, in New York, especially during the winter, Mincha was really tough. I mean, I was in the middle of classes, and, the last time for Mincha would be about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was just horrible. So in those days, I don't know if they still have this in America, they had telephone booths. Maybe I'm really dating myself. You remember telephone booths? So I used to go, yes, I used to go into a telephone booth, pick up the phone, and I made a long distance call to the one above, and I davened Mincha. The only problem was that after a few seconds, the operator gets on the phone and says, hang up the phone. So it wasn't so easy. That's why, we have 3 matzahs on the night of Pesach, one for Avram, one for Yitzchak, and one for Yaakov. And Avram was the one who established Tfilas Shachris, and who established Mincha? Yitzchak. Who established Ma'ariv? Yaakov. So the middle matzah is the matzah of Mincha, of Yitzchak. And which matzah do we break? The middle matzah. Take a break for Mincha.
Oh.
All right, you didn't like that. All right. I thought it was quite funny. Not very funny, but funny. Anyway. So the Tefillah of Mincha draws the attention of Breslov, especially Rabbi Nassan. On this section of Hilchas Tfilas Mincha, he has how many chapters? Oh my gosh, it keeps going and going. The 6th chapter itself is about 100 pages, which means by the rate they're going, you're going to need about 3 volumes just on Hilchas Tfilas Mincha. Why is Mincha so fascinating to Breslov? Why does it capture their attention? So in order to answer that question, we need to introduce a concept called Tzimtzum. What time is it? Just because
35.
35? 8:35. So we started at what time? At a quarter to 7. Quarter to 8. So we go to, let's say, till quarter to 9. So how many? We have about 10 minutes left. Okay. Now, what does tzimtzum mean? Literally, again, it's hard to translate that word into English. It means restriction. You take something that is not restricted, it's like kind of moves in all directions, and you confine it. It's also a process of withdrawal. What do I mean by withdrawal? That when you're out there, then that's not tzimtzum. But when you sort of move into yourself a little bit, you create, a little bit of an alcove for yourself. That's called tzimtzum. Now, why is tzimtzum a good thing? I mean, it sounds like a bad thing. In fact, in the laws of Sefiros, we have Esses Sefiros. The second sphere is called Gvura. And tzimtzum is always related to Gvura. Gvura is din. Din meaning strict justice. What comes before Gvura, the first of the 10? Chesed. Chesed is like Avram Avinu is like giving to everybody. He doesn't have any restrictions. He's not withdrawn. He's out there in his Oel. He and Sari Menu have an open tent. Come in, have a piece of pizza. or whatever they served over there. And that's how they did kiruv, right? If you look at the writings of Rav Noach Weinberg, Zichron Levracha, of Eshat Torah, they'll tell you the key of keys to kiruv is to invite people into your house, give them a good meal. And that's Avram Avinu. That's uncontrolled chesed. It's just uncontrolled, unlimited. And then we have gvura. Gvura means we start withdrawing, we start pulling back. I mean, that doesn't sound like a good thing. And if tzimtzum is a reflection of gvuros, then why do we want tzimtzum? And this is going to be the essence of Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu, as opposed to Avram, is going to represent tzimtzum. Why is tzimtzum so critical? For this, we have to introduce one basic concept of creation of the Arizal, right? The Arizal who lived 5 centuries ago, where? In Tzfat. If you're up in Tzfat, which I love to go up to Tzfat, you have to visit the Shul of the Ari. There are 2 of them actually, and then there's the Kvura, the Makom Kvura, the Tzion Kever of the Ari. The Arizal says that when God created the world, there had to be tzimtzum. Why? God is infinite, and the light of God is infinite. But God wanted to create man, and man was meant to be challenged by bechira, by free choice, with all the challenges of life and 613 mitzvahs. So the ultimate goal of creation is that man should be faced with challenges. But wait a second. Does man have the capacity to receive the light of infinity? What's called Ein Sof. It's impossible. To receive Ein Sof, we need to create kalim. That's another very important word in the Arizal. Kalim literally translated as vessels. The vessels could receive the light, that infinite light, but only if there's a process of tzimtzum. There's got to be a tzimtzum that will constrict the infinite and make it into finite. And man has to create the kalim to receive that. So when we get to Tefillah Shachris, for example, in the morning, we're talking about whom? Avram Avinu. We're talking about which midah, which trait? Chesed. That's infinite. That has no bounds. And man cannot live in that boundless state where the infinite light cannot be received by vessels. And therefore we need a tzimtzum. Who represents that tzimtzum? Who represents restricting the light and withdrawing into himself, so to speak? Yitzchak Avinu. And that's the greatness of Mincha. Now, Mincha was established to correspond to a different Mincha. Which other Mincha? What's the original Mincha? Not the Karba Mincha. The Karba Mincha is very unique. It has what do you say?
Also, Korban Tamid.
The Tamid is a Korban Ola. But I'm talking about Korban Mincha. What's unique about a Korban Mincha? It's something called Ola V'Yored. You don't have to write that down. But what it means is that Korban Mincha will depend upon your financial status. If you have the wherewithal, you have the money in the bank, then you'll bring what's called a seh, loosely translated as a lamb, and that's quite expensive. My brother-in-law, who does research in at the Hebrew University, he told me that to order a rabbit costs over 1,000 shekels, just a rabbit. Imagine what a lamb would cost. Anyway, so if he's poor, he's destitute, then instead of bringing a lamb, he brings a different kind of mincha. He brings birds. Birds are cheaper. Which birds does he take? And it's Shnei B'nei Yona or Torim, or whatever it is, turtle doves, whatever the different kind of pigeons and so forth and so on. If he can't even afford birds, then he brings hemach. He brings just flour. That's all. So that the Korban Mincha represents anius with an ayin. Anius means poverty. And that's the midah of tzimtzum. Why is poverty indicative of tzimtzum? Because, you can only do chesed and reach out to people and invite them for dinner if you have the wherewithal. You have a nice apartment, a flat, you have plenty of money in the bank, you can buy the right things. An ani has to be, working very, very hard to eke out a couple of shekels so that he can put food on the table. And that's the Korban Mincha. The greatness of the Korban Mincha is that it reaches out to everyone. Whereas other korbanos, certain people will not be able to bring the korban, they just simply don't have the wherewithal to do so. The greatness of a Korban Mincha is also what we call the midah of hanava. Remember, we spoke before about humility. Well, humility is represented conceptually by the ani, by the poor person. He exists in a state of dependence upon others, and therefore he has humility. He's not a big shot. Oh, I can make it on my own. And this concept of humility is a concept of tzimtzum, and it requires that a person be mitzamtzem himself. And instead of being, let's say, all over the show, he moves into himself. And Rabbi Nosson is going to he's going to argue, as we'll see next week in Mitzvah Hashem, Zeh b'chinas Sefiras HaOmer, that Sefiras HaOmer belongs to Hilchos Tfilas Mincha. Why? Because he says that Sefiras HaOmer is the bechina, it corresponds or it's the aspect of Tikkun HaTzimtzumim. When a person does a tzimtzum, then it's a very dangerous kind of thing. He may be mitzamtzem maybe too much. He may be mitzamtzem less than he should be, and it really has to be mitzamtzem more. So the idea of Sefiras HaOmer is Omer. What is Omer? The word Omer is a measurement. And the measurement of the Omer indicates that a person has to be measured out. The tzimtzum process requires that he do a measurement. And the mitzvah Sefiras HaOmer begins with which holiday? The second day, which holiday? Of Pesach. What's the holiday of Pesach about? It's about Geula. It's about Cherus. It's about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ein Sof, in his ultimate chesed and compassion on the Jewish people when we had no real merits, because Chazal say we're on the level of halalu of the avodah zarah, halalu of the avodah zarah, but God revealed the light. That's called V'diglu alai av. It's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim in which God skipped over everything. Man was not worthy. But from the time that we bring the Omer and on, man has to have what's called the sarusa dilatata. He's got to take the initiative. He's got to build. He's got to create kalim. He's got to do tzimtzum. And every day he's called upon to address a different midah, a different trait, and try to make it into the right measure so that he could create the right kalim and receive that or ein sof of infinity. And that's the tzimtzum of Tfilas Mincha that begins with Sefiras HaOmer after Yetzias Mitzrayim, after God showered on us all the chesed that we didn't deserve. So we're going to stop now here. I'm going to again thank everyone for coming. Ye ratzon may be His will that we count the Sefira. We're now moving on to Chodesh Iyar. Chodesh Iyar is a great opportunity to project us forward towards Chodesh Sivan, which is the month of Kabbalah HaTorah. So we should, in Yirtzeh Hashem, work day by day. And every day is important according to the Bahag. If you miss a full day, that's it. You can't continue counting. Well, we might get a Meiser sphere in there if we can. And we should build day by day, trying to create those vessels that'll allow us to receive the Orein Sof, to get closer and closer to Hashem with humility, with compassion, with chesed, and with din. Keni Ratzon.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Wish everyone a great Shabbos.
It reminded me of an interesting story. What
Yeah.
happened when you talked about the telephone? The rabbi's going to the Pope, to the Vatican. And he sees the telephone there, and the Pope says, the rabbi said, "What's the phone for?" That's a line to God. Costs you $500 to make the phone call to God. Says, "You really? Okay." Gives him $500, picks up the phone, speak to God. Then the Pope comes to Yerushalayim and to the rabbi's office, and he sees a phone there. And the Pope says, "What that phone?" "It's a phone call to God." And how much does it cost? Nothing. In Rome, it's long distance. Here, it's a direct line.
Very good. Yeah. Okay,
Welcome, Breslov.
thank you so much.
Right up, Rabbi.
Thank you so